Okay, so HERÄÄMÖ is EClamptic's monthly event series. These events are for people interested in systemic change and wicked problems. A place where they can deepen their understanding and meet other people with similar interests. These events always feature an international or national guest who discuss a specific case with practical implementations and theoretical background. And as you see, the language of the event is English, but you may pose questions also in Finnish, and we help with the translation if needed. And I hope that we receive also questions from Zoom. Mia will help Zoom participants with that. And as we want to encourage you to chat and network with other people here, you may find it easier to find people with similar interests when you take a look at the list on the table. There is a list of participants who have given the permission to share their names. So you find those lists on the tables as well as on the registration table. Please help yourself. Okay, and then about the last changes, or the latest changes we made. So, we have modified the concept according to the feedback we received. For now on, HERÄÄMÖ events are more interactive, and we will have only one speaker at a time, so that there will be more time for discussion and chat. We want HERÄÄMÖ events to support learning, and to do so, we interview the speaker beforehand in a short video, in a short intro video, to help you to get orientated. I hope that at least some of you have watched it earlier. I noticed that not all of you, so next time do that. I don't want to talk in front of a video if people aren't watching it. And yeah, after the event we organize HERÄÄMÖ After Talk, and on Friday it will be our first time when we do so, and if it works out we will do it in the rest of the HERÄÄMÖs as well. And this HERÄÄMÖ After Talk is for people who would like to continue the discussion about the topic and kind of digest the information they've got. I will share the date and time after this today's presentation. And this venue, Starter Helsinki, has also developed their facilities. And now people in the back rows, hopefully, can also see me, or not me, but the presentation on the stage, additional stage, screen, sorry, and also hear the voice well. Do you hear the voice well? Great, because we have gotten extra stereos, so now people in the front doesn't need to scream. And as in earlier HERÄÄMÖ events, the hashtags to be used are HERÄÄMÖ and CitraLab, and we encourage you to be active and use them. This presentation will be streamed on Zoom, and the video will be uploaded on YouTube afterwards. You are generally welcome to make notes during the presentation, but we also share the presentation slides as well as the video as part of a lab blog post afterwards. How many of you were in December's HERÄÄMÖ? Quite a few. Okay, so at least then you, well, for the rest of you, for the rest of you to know what we talked about then, it was an event about networks and collective impact. And today we will continue with a related topic because collaboration is at the core of systemic change. We are grateful to have Solveig Zophoniasdottir from EU's main climate initiative, Climate-KIC, with us today. Solveig works as learning design lead, is originally from Iceland and currently located in Copenhagen. When I heard the word orchestrating for the first time, I associated it immediately with music and symphony orchestra. But however, Solveig will explain us how it can be used in other domains as well. Let's Solveig introduce herself in further detail. Please welcome to the stage, Solveig.
So I will need your help. I just want to put a couple of disclaimers in the beginning. First one is that I move around quite a lot when I talk. If I'm approaching the stage too much, then please give me a anxiety-driven look on your face that says, I'm just about to fall. And you that are sitting in the front row, please catch me. Next one is that I'm also notoriously bad with microphones. So once I start dropping my mic, and if you in the back can't hear me, then please let me know. Just give me a little nudge, and I'll try to make sure that the mic comes a little bit closer up here. So, as Salla mentioned in her introduction, and thank you for that, I'm here to talk a little bit about Climate-KIC, our work, give a little insight in terms of our orchestration of ecosystems, but I will mostly be focusing on collaboration and talking a little bit about how we are creating spaces for learning and spaces for sense-making. I think in terms of that, I am hoping that we will also have a bit of a collaboration between us here. And I will ask you to talk to one another. I will ask especially the people in the back to make sure that they are not sitting too much alone, so they are close to another human being, so they can actually talk and reflect with another person. But just to maybe kick off and tell you a little bit about me. So my name is Solveig Zophoniasdottir. It's actually Solveig Helga Zophoniasdottir. No one can handle that. So everyone calls me Solle. I'm Icelandic, so I was really, really happy to be here in Finland, because I thought I was going to go and have a little bit of something from home, so I was looking forward so much to the snow. But that's going to be next time, so I hope that there will be another invitation. Just a little bit about me and the work that I do. So I worked with Climate-KIC for around 6 years, focusing on education to begin with, education programs and the delivery of the education programs, and then moving more and more into just learning, facilitation of learning. My background before Climate-KIC is very much on process facilitation, on leadership coaching, facilitation of creative spaces. So I've worked independently. My education background is in strategic leadership towards sustainability, and I'm an educated chaos pilot. So navigating in chaos is a little bit what the chaos pilots are about. I've really taken that to heart. And I have created my own learning field of chaos as well, as I'm a mother of 2 small children. And I think that that's one of the best practice grounds for working in emergence and complexity. And what I am passionate about in my day work and sort of overall is helping creating environments that enable teams and human beings to thrive. And that's really where my passion comes from. And when it is then put in the context of climate impact, I think that then sparks fly. So that's a little bit about me. What I would like to do today with you is sort of walk through this. So I want to do a little bit of a check-in with all of you, talk a little bit about Climate-KIC, our way of working with innovation, the transition that we are on in terms of that, dive a bit into the collaborations part that we are also focusing on, and that we see in essence foundational to the type of work that we are doing. Then I want to exchange war stories, show some battle scars from my side and hopefully from your side as well, in terms of sort of where's the messy, tricky bit about enabling collaboration and being in collaboration. And then I think we should all check out and sort of end the session together. I'm hoping that we do quite a lot of interactive way of being. I'm usually quite uncomfortable on stage, so I might come a little bit closer, but I hope that you will also be coming a little bit closer to one another. And so I will request that. And I'll request that we do that in just the beginning. So I would like to ask all of you to turn to your neighbor and I'll give you a minute to think, but what I'm essentially asking you to do is to give your neighbor a bit of a reflection about how you're arriving into today, and what is it that you're curious about. So, one-on-one, if you could just have a brief conversation around those topics. So, thank you for that. I think it seems that everyone has gotten their cup of coffee and is a bit warm and warmed up, so that's a really good start. Can we just hear a couple of popcorns, as we call it? Can we just hear a couple of snippets from the room in terms of what is it that you're curious about? So can one or two of the pairs here share with us? What did you actually discuss? Were you on topic? Did you go completely in a different direction? Yes? Completely different direction? Yes. That's okay. That's how collaborations and conversations tend to go. Anyone who stayed on topic? There's one man in the back who stayed on topic. Are you happy to give us a little insight into the conversation that was happening there? And thank you very much for following instructions.
Hello, Janna Mattila from Kela. I'm curious about the learning bit that you're going to put into the theme here. And my friend here was curious to see who showed up, who comes into these sessions. And that's about it. But we stayed on the theme pretty much.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So yeah, I will try to focus a little bit more on the learning bit, and then I will also give some space so you can kind of dive into who is here in the room. And in that, I will ask you to continue the conversations with each other, and we'll try some constellations of having conversations across, so you're not always talking to the same person. But before that, I just want to maybe set the scene a little bit for our work in Climate-KIC and the urgency. As I don't think I need to hold a lecture around this. Climate emergency is here. Demand is growing. We're seeing more and more of the public engaging, and there is real need for climate action. And the action that we need to take need to match the urgency and the scale. There is more and more people and more public engagement. Citizens are really moving forth. And the 20th September protest in 2019, where the young people were marching, had around 4 million participants. So there is, the heat is on, and it's up to us to start doing things. And in terms of who we are and what we bring to the climate challenge, EIT Climate-KIC is Europe's largest public-private partnership that focuses on climate innovation. And we want to do that through essentially innovation. We want to build a net zero carbon economy. And we're supported in terms of our funding through the European Institute of Technology, which is a body of the European Union. So that's sort of a bit on the background. So we work across Europe, focusing on partnerships and collaborations. And here is just a bit of a still sort of, in terms of our track record around climate innovation, what it is that we do, who we are. We have 400 formal partners. We have supported over 1,600 climate-positive startups. We have contributed to 2,300 full-time jobs being created since 2010. We have had around 44,000 participants through our various education activities. So these are just some highlights and the numbers. But we have also been on a journey of transitions, where we have, in the beginning, predominantly focused on single point sort of innovation. And they're moving towards, in around 2015, towards the orchestration of innovation ecosystems and sort of a cluster thinking. So we have transitioned a bit, but we're coming to a new way of being and thinking, where we are focusing on systems innovation and a transformative service model, as we call it. Oh. And in terms of our theory of change, where we've put our main focus on is on we have sort of clustered around finance, cities, land, and industry. So we have what we have sort of climate impact dossiers or focus areas that I won't go so much into, but I know that you will get these slides, and there's plenty more reading material as well available. But we have sort of 5 overarching systems. We're also starting to focus more on water as well, and these are then our related innovation priorities. So, in terms of our approach, I think the time for incremental change is over. We need a new approach. And the way that we have sort of positioned in terms of our strategy is essentially saying, working through incremental changes is not going to be enough. We need a fundamental transformation. And our vision for that, essentially, as I mentioned before, creating a prosperous, inclusive society. We want to be on a mission to catalyze this change for climate action. And we essentially, as our strategy is called, are really pushing for transformation in time. So we don't believe that we have endless amount of time to actually deliver. It needs to start happening now. We need to start catalyzing now. We need to start working together in a different way now. And in terms of that movement and that shift that we are trying to create in our system is that we are moving into a portfolio approach. We want to focus on creating and orchestrating a portfolio of innovation projects and experiments that are really positioned to learn from each other. And we want to address we want to work with wide array of change levers. We want to make sure that we are understanding and seeing and appreciating what is happening in different systems that we're engaging in. I see a lot of you taking pictures of the slides. I do the same, but you will get the slides. So now the question for me is, are your pictures of the slides better than the original slides? Food for thought. And as mentioned, so again, we need this innovation to catalyze system change. And what we are really focusing on is acting simultaneously. And how do we actually then manage and work and orchestrate and focus on that simultaneous action? And in terms of that, I think that changing and that type of activity needs everyone. So we need our partner community. We need new partners also to join this network of change agents that we have been engaging with and that we believe are committed to collective action. But in terms of that partnership and moving that forward, that's quite a feat. And there's a lot of learnings to come from in terms of how we work and collaborate together. And maybe just in terms of, so our systems innovation and the way that the methodology and how we're approaching systems innovation is essentially focusing on the intent, so really understanding, mapping systems challenge, really engaging with demand side, with challenge owners, with city mayors, with regional leaders, really understanding what the ambition, what is the need, what is it that we actually need to work towards, to define the intervention strategies together. So really, really pause in terms of framing and collaborating on pausing there and figuring out together in terms of where is it that innovation should take place. So really stopping and in collaboration work together in terms of designing relevant innovation positions. So where is it that we should essentially be focusing our intention on? And then for each of those challenges, for each of that problem area, to essentially work with building and managing a portfolio of experimentations, of innovations, of activities and actions to learn from that are connected, that are designed to address different leverage points. So orchestrating that portfolio and then being able to look through and learn from that portfolio to generate intelligence in terms of where should we then accelerate, where should we minimize, how can we make sure that we are motivating and nudging and experimenting in those systems instead of going from A to B. I think I skipped this one because I have already gone through that one. So in terms of those portfolios, so deep demonstrations are basically our main innovation vehicle from now on. They are something that we launched earlier, actually in 2019. So these are testbed environments, bigger clusters of experimentations or test beds for I'll move forward here. For our innovation activities. So we have 8 of those. We're focusing on healthy, clean cities as a cluster of innovations. We're focusing on the just transition of heavy industry regions, heavy coal regions, resilient net zero emissions maritime hubs, so focusing on ports and maritime, circular regenerative economies, so the circular agenda, resilient regions, how to build up collaborations in the regions, different regions of Europe, long-termism, which focuses on mainly financial aspects of how to go from short-term thinking to long-term thinking, landscape as carbon sinks, and then food systems and climate-friendly diets. So these are sort of where we have found relevant problem owners, and we've set a very specific intent. And as our CEO, Kirsten Dunlop, has said, that these are intended as inspirational examples. So these are where we really want to put the ambition high, and we really want to go for striving, showing what is possible when innovation is being orchestrated. And for us to step into that field, these need to represent the growth edge. And that growth edge is essentially staying on the learning and experimentation, so that we, as a community of actors, stay on our learning edge where it is uncomfortable, where it is difficult, and where we have the possibility of potentially falling over, but where the rewards can be quite great. And just in terms of sort of the collaboration angle, just to give you a little bit of a dive into one of those deep demonstrations. If we focus in on the healthy, clean cities, where, of course, I don't need to really go into the challenges that each city and the cities in general are facing in terms of being healthy places to live. I think that there is some global challenges that are unified, and then there are many, many different sort of diverse challenges that are very nationally dependent. We have gathered and are working with an initial cohort of cities that are essentially problem owners. So these are 15 cities across Europe where the governments have essentially committed to ambitious goals, systems-wide change, and they're ready to come and start from an experimental mindset and view in terms of moving forward. I'm not going to go through this. You can go through that at your own leisure at another point. So we have gathered and convened these 15 cities as problem owners or problem holders. Then we are working within that with 5 partners, design partners, that are essentially helping us and helping the cities design a portfolio of interventions, so portfolio of interventions and experimentations. And through that, we will select that portfolio, compose a portfolio of activities that we move forward with. So in that process, the way that the portfolio essentially works in practice is that we as an organization and as a convener are also working with different processes in terms of composing a portfolio and then making sense and learning from that portfolio. And essentially that's sort of more on the collaboration learning angle that I would like to talk about today. So the portfolio in practice, here you can see an overview of the portfolio. We're using something called Climate-KIC Acceptive as an overview of all our different innovation activities. You can go in, you can browse, you can see all the activities that we have within our network. You can look at different levers of change, you can look at different change initiatives, and this is where our sort of visualization of the entire Climate-KIC community and where we are activating and where our Climate-KIC ecosystem is active and what is happening within it. So I encourage you to have a look at that. Here you can see selected activities and things that we have gone through and where we have essentially chosen to focus on. Our processes for selecting into this portfolio are essentially now social processes where we as an organization, as a community, come together to compose a portfolio through bigger decision-making processes where we have around 100 people in a room for the duration of 4 days that take decisions in terms of how to compose a network and how to compose a portfolio of activities that is diverse enough in terms of experimentation that we can accelerate our learning. And here's an example of one of those sessions, and where you can see people having an experience of starting to choose and compose into a portfolio of activities. I'm gonna open here for some questions and some thoughts on where I am right now, and what does this give any food for thought for you? Yes. Front row question.
Yes, I'm Sara Lilja Rootsten. I'm very happy to be here. Last 3 years, I have coordinated in Finland climate change adaptation. I'm not working with that anymore for government, but that's my passion. I would like to continue the work, and I think that there's two problems to tackle this climate change, and the key issue is this learning process. That there's a lot of it's difficult to think on the same time when I'm speaking, but anyhow, the first problem is the learning process, and the second is that we don't have time to understand each other, and your processes, they look very good, and I'm sure that we really need that kind of thinking and that kind of portfolio to raise awareness, mm-hmm. and to raise resilience for the societies. But I would like to ask you that have you analyzed our societies and the structure that we have quite a lot of hierarchies in our society, and we need to raise trustness in the society, that's the only way to continue understanding that you know your network, and you trust the network, that you will manage something new together. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you understand what I mean.
Let me try to summarize and see if I can. So, yes, one thing is to have glossy images of lots of different types of activities and areas you want to start engaging in and working in. And then there is the activity of launching those activities and experimentation. And then actually comes the messy, hard work of how are you going to accelerate the work there? How are you actually making sure that you are learning from that work? And at the same time as you are experimenting, you want to be accelerating the learning. You also want to be building the trust. And you want to make sure that you have the different levels and layers of work. So it's messy. I'm going to come a little bit back to one part of your question around the learning a little bit later on. I think that what I can use your question essentially to move a bit into describing how do we do this in terms of composing the portfolio of experimentation. We select that portfolio through an open process with essentially a segment of our organization and our community where everyone gets a say in that. So we host open social processes around decision making. But we do participatory decision making when we move forward and we choose our experimentation portfolio. What we then do as well is that we come together 2 times a year in terms of the whole organization to make decisions in terms of what it is that we are composing our portfolio of. So what type of activities do we want to do? We come together additionally twice a year as well for a social sense-making process, which is essentially about learning about the activities that we are doing. So that collective learning, that's again a process across actors, across the different people that we are working with. And in that, we are hoping that we are building quite a lot of that trust and transparency and trying to build away from the hierarchical structures of how things are usually working in terms of that. So there's an open process in terms of selection, and there's an open process in terms of learning. And it's very built on social collective learning. I'll skip a little bit through this for interest of time. But what essentially has come up in our first, and what our learnings have been around stepping into this way of working with portfolios and learning through portfolios, was that in many, many different ways, we were not equipped to build trust. We hadn't really taken into consideration what the quality of the collaboration needed to be able to orchestrate those different types of collaborations and this different type of processes. And therefore, what we had to do in order for us to start to be successful on this type of multi-layered, multi-types of experimentation portfolios was to focus on how are we also stepping into creating spaces for collaboration and learning, and how do we focus on that? Where is it that we need to learn as a system, as Climate-KIC orchestrator, but also as Climate-KIC as the wider community? How do we build a platform of that trust so that we can move forward? And in terms of that, before I dive a little bit into what we have learned and where we are at and how we're building up our capability, I would just like to open the floor and ask you again to talk to one another in terms of collaboration. What is needed in order to accelerate learning and really move collaboration? So can you just give each other a couple of, and can you actually try to talk to another person so that you can move? So the front row just moves back. So find another person, talk about collaboration. So let's leave it here, and let's experiment. Let's hear a little bit if you manage to stay on topic this time around. So, yeah, let's hear a little bit what you talked about this time around, and if you actually manage to stay on topic. I can see that there's already one. Yes, over here.
Yes, I'm a case pilot alumni as well. Veera, hi.
Hi.
We talked a little bit about collaboration, so we did manage to stay on topic, and we talked that there's before you kind of get to the key issues, which were like how do you build ownership of the topic, so it doesn't stay as like okay we sense, made and learned, but then like kind of building those relationships that last over time after the event itself. And the ownership of actually taking things forward. So like how does the learning land in any organization? How do you kind of integrate that into the work? It's like a challenge in itself. And to kind of even get to that point, you need to have quite a high level of trust between participants. And then what we talked about then at the end point that we're really curious about in Climate-KICs and this portfolio approach case that how do you kind of manage that relationship between the different portfolios, and how do you kind of nurture learning between those projects rather than only like, okay, Climate-KIC is learning from all of this, but what's the kind of network of learning? And that seems difficult.
Oh, it's very difficult. Excellent question. I'll come back to that one. There was another one over here, and then yes.
Thank you. So my name is Tina Nyfors. I'm from the Lund University, and we had a discussion here about the importance of collaboration, and it's really key. And we spoke about like having the big picture of networks and how things work, but we also spoke about the importance for your own work to be able to focus on something. So you cannot really, or maybe some can work with the whole and having this overview, but it's also crucial to focus and make your own contribution on some part which is manageable and small enough.
Yeah. So how to manage the actual focus on actually achieving something, and then at the same time building those relationships. So just for Mikael, I think we'll start here in the back and then we'll come to the front. Then we are doing a very efficient process over here. So the lady in the back with her hand up.
My name is Julia Ojanen. I work for Plan International. Yes, thanks. So we talked about how to align incentives in an organization. Collaboration is doesn't really happen unless people's professional incentives, personal incentives, and organizational priorities are in line with each other. And it's not always so easy. I work for a large organization with 10,000 employees, and my job is to try to accelerate climate action in all fronts, in programming as well as funding as well as footprint. And everybody says, yeah, go Julia, this is great. But then when it comes to, really holding people accountable to this commitment, they're very busy. Are they really, are the incentives really in line with this commitment, and how to reward? My partner here gave a good example of maybe rewarding people by calling them, giving them like a reputational kind of thank you, saying, can you come and tell everybody about what you're doing in your organization, and kind of giving them that kind of reward when it cannot be financial or otherwise. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. This is one of the points as well that we've been focusing on in terms of how to actually do that. So I've gotten now where I can collect the points and make sure that I address them and give some food for thought on that. Can we get this last insight from the conversation?
Thank you. My name is Ilona Taimela, and I'm from. Actually, I've been in the city of Helsinki as an educational consultant, but I wanted to give you two different examples. Saara, next to me, actually, we had a big project last year, and we had more than 200 students teenagers coming from all over the world to come to Helsinki for a climate change student kind of a summit. And the initiative actually came from a very small organization, NGO. And when a big, sort of municipality, and Sara was representing a ministry, and then we have had actually collaboration of 4 different ministries as well, and the municipality, to start to listen to a small NGO's ideas. There needs to be kind of a trust, and there needs to be also an understanding that this is according to our strategies as well. And so the initiative came, and then we started working and building the partnership, and also understanding each other, how we work, and how do we finance it, and who actually has the ownership of it, and how the ownership of a big summit can be spread through different ministries and different municipalities and different NGOs. And then we contacted also, we collaborated with Sitra. There was a big circular economy, 2,000 people came from all over the world for circular economy summit also in Finlandia Hall, and we got the students also on the stage there. And then we had also, on top of that, teachers from around the world coming. So we said, okay, we have the student side, but then we also want to engage the teachers, of course, with a different program. So then we had contacted the University of Helsinki, for example, TAT, and we have WWF, and we have a lot of different NGOs, the World Wildlife Foundation and so forth. So that all came together, and the ownership actually has to be on everywhere. So it cannot be sort of that only one has the ownership, but that okay, this is my idea and I'm leading this. But it has to be spread all over, and that's something I think that in this big of a tackle we have to sort of have it there. And then of course the students who came from all over, they are taking the ownership now throughout the everywhere, wherever they came from. So in Sri Lanka, in India, in Hong Kong, we had people from Malawi and so forth. So they are taking it on in their own spaces. And so I think sometimes we have to put also the ego aside, and that's sometimes a big thing in a bigger organizations, big leaders, and bigger bosses and so forth, in a way that okay, they have to put their titles away and just give it. And I think in your portfolio, what I'm missing, because I'm from the education side, working with the students, and today I actually have 150 headmasters to talk to them about climate change and these things. How are they going to tackle it in their schools? I'm missing over there the youth. How are you participating, collaborating with the youth and with the teachers, because they are the ones actually in 2050 who are really going to be tackling with this more, and we need to be enabling them. So that's in a way my question maybe.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll put that forward. So was there a question from the Zoom? Yeah.
Thank you, Kaisla, for the question. Is there a specific process or methods for the sense-making that you do twice a year with the actors? Are these meetings in person with all actors in the ecosystem?
Right. So I'll touch upon the sense-making. I can hear that. I think that we should go more into the collaboration. So let's take the messy collaboration and what we have learned from this way of working with collaboration. Then I will touch upon the sense-making and come back to the engagement of different stakeholders and students and how we work across areas and activity. But essentially, as I said before, what we are really trying to do through every activity that we have is connecting our interventions, learning from each other, and making sure that we start with a very clear intent, that we move forward, and that we are able to reflect, that we really take some time to sense-make, reflect, and build between, so that we can actually reiterate our event and move forward. So this is something that comes from a collaboration that we have with some good people that we have been working with on our sense-making practices. But in terms of just the whole ecosystems and building up networks, what we know, and I think everyone knows, that in terms of building good and robust ecosystems and diving into that, you really do need collaboration. Ecosystems really need collaboration, but collaboration needs quality relationships and good process management. And that's where we have chosen to focus very much on, is how do we put our focus more into building the quality relationships, and how are we looking at our processes for learning? How are we introducing new ways of learning and new ways of building connections, new ways of building trust? And I'll skip over this. And one of the things that I think is the main learning that we've had is, since we started diving much more into this way of experimentation and this way of working with portfolios, is that we need to take collaboration seriously. And collaboration is such a no-brainer for many of us that work in collaborative spaces, that we down-prioritize what it actually takes. Because it's such, everyone knows how to collaborate, of course we do, but we never really figure out exactly what it is that we put then focus on in order for igniting that collaboration. And some areas that I think I would like to touch upon now is that whether we are continuously learning and failing and learning again on, is one of the things around the intention. And I think that comes back to your question in terms of where are people at, what is it that they're willing to set in, and focusing on intention setting and reviewing the intention again and again and again, depending on what it is that you're learning in your collaborative experimentations or in the activities of whatever ecosystems or multi-stakeholder activities that you have. And managing relationships continuously. Not setting relationships and expecting relationships to be as they were. So it's in some ways a bit like marriages, that you need to continuously be learning and growing together, but you need to put some emphasis and some food and fertilizer into the management of relationships. Not only one-on-one in terms of you as an orchestrator, as a convener in terms of the relationship, but managing the relationships across. That working with collaborations in a new way, where you want to induce and create trustfulness and certain set of vulnerability in terms of experimentations, it takes change on an organizational level, but it takes a huge change on a personal level. So you need to put time aside for actually developing and cultivating the individuals that you expect to really stay in relationships, and that you expect to actually have a good way of collaborating across. And breathing. So giving oxygen to the spaces that are useless. I think that we underestimate, and I think we in the organization have underestimated quite a lot, how much breathing space and around the edges is needed for a human connection and for connections to flourish. And that is a space that we usually ignore. And Sal and I were having a really interesting conversation here before in terms of when we have events, when we set convening, when we have meetings, what we usually do is that we optimize our meeting spaces, we optimize our intention setting, we design out any type of, or we don't simply commit to showing up for the chatting or the coffee breaks. We can always switch those spaces that are for something that is more around human to human connection, and any type of serendipity or unstructured spaces are usually taken out, especially when you are in convening and orchestrating mode. So you usually design those systems or those spaces out instead of actually designing them in. And in terms of building relationships, these moments are gold. And what we have started to do is to be much more conscious about how are we designing these spaces in, also in and engineering those spaces in our collaboration activities, especially in online collaboration. So we work across Europe, we work in many different fields, and what we have done, what we have noticed there is that online collaboration space is sterile of any human connections and chit-chats, unless someone is late, or their technology fails you, which is pretty much all the time, so that kind of happens. But it's important to design this in, because it's such a basic thing. Another thing that I think we realized quite quickly when we started doing participatory decision making, when we started sort of unfolding and wanting to be much more curious together, was that basic skills that we had an assumption that were basic across all of our staff, they're just not so basic. And that we were listening for specific information as an organization. We were whole and as individuals. So what we have done now is that we have actually invested quite a lot in all our participatory processes. When we come together, when we are in ecosystems meetings, when we are trying to start new types of initiatives, is to focus in on actually having some training elements that have to do with deep listening, understanding how to listen with empathy. Very, very basic skills. We just don't cultivate those skills. And those are essential in terms of especially when you want to listen for multiple intents that need to come together, or multiple agendas that need to be brokered. And that needs to be on the agenda. Another thing that I think has been really interesting for us to learn is to embrace the mess and bring the shadow sides into the room for any type of orchestration of activities that you are doing. We tend to, again, optimize and take out the vulnerabilities, especially when you have bigger organizations where you're facilitating processes across stakeholders. Everyone comes with their climate agenda, their big impact goals, their branding, and then you sit down on the table and you discuss from there. And what has been beneficial for us is to start trying to have conversations with municipalities, with startups, with bigger companies, where we say we want to bring the whole person in the room, we also want to bring the whole organization in the room. So let's have a conversation about us, where we think that we are potentially onto something, but also where we think that we potentially have some sites that are still difficult and messy and we have to work with. That leads back to setting the intention and viewing the intention and actually being quite honest in terms of where are we starting to build from. And again, to go back to married life and dating life and all that, it goes to the basic sense of you meet someone, they say, I love paragliding, and you say, oh, me too. And 6 months later, you hate it. You will never do it. It's not. So there is something about that authenticity and honesty that we need to be able to start designing in. And organizational vulnerability is crazy difficult, and also just a bit of an icky topic. But in terms of true innovation and true acceleration of learning, it's incredibly important. And I think another thing that we, as much as we started thinking about how can we accelerate our learning, how can we be more bold with our experimentation, how can we go more into working in a different way, we were desperate for every single tool and every single framework and every single box that we could create and get around what it is that we're trying to do. But there is something about that dance that also sometimes needs to be not about the tools, but actually just about the humans that are in the space. So that are a couple of points that I think are sort of have surfaced for us in terms of where there has been a gap or a field of conversations missing. And for us, that sort of those points also then it became very obvious that in terms of the interventions, in terms of the activities that we are trying to create and the change that we want to create in the world, we really needed to focus on our people in our community, because if we are designing these interventions, it's actually them who will be doing it. So I come back to this again and again in terms of the work that we do. The success of any intervention really depends on the interior condition of the person who is intervening and the way that they approach it. So cultivating a different way of listening and different way of being is important for whatever you're doing on a more high level, building consortiums, for example. I'm going to stop there and put a little question mark there before I tell you more concretely what type of activities we've put in place. So again, maybe now just the person next to you. Is this echoing something for you? Is there something here that you recognize in your organization, either something that you have started actively doing or something that really is a shadow side for where you're working? So, once again, I stop you here. Let me see if I continue talking, if people start listening. Let's see if that works. Yeah, kind of does work. It was either keeping talking and seeing if people would stop, or throwing myself and seeing if people would stop talking there. Can we get, again, a little bit of glimpse of conversation? Who dared to say something that was difficult and messy, for example?
Hi, I'm Esko. I've been working with leadership in public sector institutions, and from your collaboration lists, I would propose actually flipping one around, your last slide, which is it was a change on the organizational and personal level, and I would suggest that organizational level change is only possible.
It doesn't happen.
If you can initiate the personal level change. Because the leaders in charge and stewarding these organizations, who themselves do want to change the system, they have no idea what they're doing, but they're in a position where they're not able to admit that, or they've created this artifice. So if we can create the conditions where they themselves have an opportunity to say, I'm in over my head, I have my new motivation to change, then we can start unlocking some larger system level changes.
Absolutely, and I think that I think you're so right. In terms of organizations are people. So people, I mean, it comes down to that. And I think in terms of what you're saying as well, in terms of that, we cannot hold people towards having some sort of a plan or answers. We are in such a tricky space of emergence, of none of us knowing what to do. And the sooner we get to a place where that's okay, and that we are navigating from where we know and then experimenting with moving forward, the easier it is. But we can't also look towards people and say, you know, you should come with saying that you don't know, but at the same time ask for the answers. And I've just been reflecting on a couple of those experiences that I have had in terms of how to set up conversations with city officials, with regional leaders, in terms of allowing for and setting up a space where we're not asking them to come with the answers. So a lot of this has to do with just how we set up sort of conversation spaces and collaboration spaces, so that we don't do the, here comes someone on stage, they're expected to speak, and of course then they feel the pressure of actually coming with some sort of a battle cry, true or false, and something around the way that we set up so that we are actually able to say, okay, no one of us knows exactly what is going to happen here, but we have some wishes for something, and we're going to investigate from that point. Of course, different people will take leadership positions in different times, but that's also one of the things that I think, and I'll come back to it, in terms of what we have tried to enable within our organization is also that leadership is not a function, it's a thing that you take and do at different points. And then in many ways that anyone who takes leadership, one of the biggest things for them to work on is also to enable their followership. Sorry, then I did it with the mic. Other sharings? What did you discuss? No? There and here.
Hi, thank you. I actually love this list. Ann Plow from Gekri Food and Tech, and I'm working to build an organization around bringing food and tech companies together to create a sustainable food system. And you know, these are things we see all the time. And one thing we talked in our group here is we love this list, and I think it goes through a lot of the things that you need to do when you're trying to create change in an organization, as you said. And I think particularly this idea of taking an intention and side by side with relationship management, because you know, if I think about the area that I'm working in, I'm working with tech companies who are creating solutions for food. I'm working with food companies who are trying to find solutions through technology, but also trying to keep their business alive. They know they're going to be disrupted. They're afraid of it. They're not really that open to telling the world that they're afraid of it, because they're also in a business that's competitive. And so, you know, to understand and give a space for those vulnerabilities is something that, of course, I'd love to continue to work on and be cognizant of when I go into these conversations, because I also don't know the answers. And that's the whole idea of a community is, you know, I've had conversations in this little circle around me that has given me a lot of ideas on collaboration and how to use data and you know, what kind of research is needed around consumption. And all of those things feed into any one of these problems we're talking about in climate change, whether it's food or some other subject, and figuring out how do we actually create a space for that collaboration. And then I'd love to hear more from you on tools and just in terms of setting up that space as you talked about, and really how do you create this platform, whether it's on a one-on-one level or in a larger group setting where you have to bring stakeholders together in order to create common intentions, but to do that carefully. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll hold that. There was one more here, yeah.
Yes, hi, I'm Anna. Come from a private foundation. We work with environmental challenges or support people who work with them. And next to me is my colleague Minttu from another kind of similar foundation. And we have been talking and trying to wrap our minds around the question of kind of, well, systems change. Ideally, it needs to kind of cover the whole society as a whole. Here in Finland, and I probably elsewhere as well, events and conversations about either systems change or climate change tend to be, you see the same faces, like here there were 10 new people and everyone else had been here before. So how do you design or engineer kind of the 360 participation for the collaboration, or do you see it as something that you would like to have?
I think so. There are two ways. I think two answers here, or two reflections here. One thing is, in terms of us as Climate-KIC as an organization, I think what we've seen is that we need to potentially stop focusing on the message that we are bringing in terms of the climate change initiatives that we want to focus on and the climate impact we want to achieve. Of course, we want to bring that message, but the focus is on the problems. And the focus is on us being curious about the problem spaces and the spaces that other people have, or cities or municipalities. Where is it that their challenges lie? And what is it there that we can work on? Where is it that we can find that commonality between any type of problem space that your organization is dealing with and our intention in the world? Is there a collaboration there? And that's the kind of, I think that's where we are transitioning more into. And that takes so much bandwidth to set up those relationships, and also takes so much curiosity in terms of not only, okay, your climate goals or your impact goals are these, and this is ours. Okay, we don't have any common fields, but to really invest in starting to be curious and know each other, I think is the only way. And I don't think that full participation is the right people are there, the right people will come. But you have to organize and orchestrate and try to nudge and motivate wherever there is ways and cracks. So I think that isn't it some Leonard Cohen song where they say, where it's like, there's cracks in everything, that's how the light gets in. And I think in many ways that's something that I see, that it's very much about that curiosity of where are those cracks and how can you then start collaborating around those. Just in terms of, maybe just also to your question before, in terms of where we are now putting focus on, in terms of becoming better at taking care of our collaboration and collaboration spaces. And this is very much seen from my sort of internal learning view. But what I have seen that is helpful for us is to start focusing on the practitioner mindset on all levels of the organization. So that you're not an expert or an owner or a fully fledged something, but that we are all practitioners, and it's about the practice, so that you're all continuously cultivating a skill or a skill set or something around that, but you're never finished. And it relieves a little bit that anxiety in terms of, am I actually, like, How big am I in this space? It becomes easier to be fluid and work together when it is about the different levels of practice, but we're all in a practice field together. So we're all learning together. I think just a huge investment in listening, like basic listening skills. How to be curious, how to listen to learn, how to ask questions to go deeper and not just say, okay, that's your goals, these are the things that you want to work on, but really dare to go into questions around challenges, around something that goes a bit, so digging, and really trying to learn about what the other organization initiative is bringing, rather than how does it match our agenda and our goals. Empathy, I think, is a word that I can sometimes see when I bring it in. People are like, oh, not in organizations, not in this, like, let's stick to business. But it's such a crucial thing, especially in the business that we are in, to actually have empathy for other people's and other organizations' intentions and why their work in the world is important to them. So really trying to understand that. And for us, again, what is outside in terms of learning and the types of facilitation and processes and initiatives that we want to create and experimentation is also inside our organization. So it's very like classical practice what you preach, but I think if you really clearly look at the way that you're doing things and what you say you want to do, it's a good checklist to think. Are we, as we say, we want to be boldly experimenting? Are we boldly experimenting within this office frame? So do we actually translate what we say we stand for and what we are into the way that we actually operate, into our meeting structures, into the way that we move things forward? Or is there an experimentation unit and like an innovation unit, and they take care of that? That's those guys. Understanding, and it comes back to my point, we've really invested into understanding what it is to hold space for things that are unexpected, hold space for things that are not on the meeting agenda, hold space for those relationship building activities, and then role modeling behaviors on all levels of the organization and all levels of the partnership. And creating that commitment to learn and test together across our initiatives. Being very clear and in the intention setting that no one is perfect, that the objective that we have is not to deliver on something, but actually learn through our activities. So what we deliver in our partnership might change. And that, I think, can be very difficult because we're so bottom line, results driven. This is our agenda, these are our climate goals, this is where we're going, but what are we learning on the way there? And how could that potentially pivot where it is that we should be going? So those are the things that we're focusing on, and how we are doing that is that we have invested a lot of time into physical meetings around talking about the experimentations and the innovation activities that we're doing, reflection for each individual staff member, creating and cultivating spaces between us and the projects that we are doing, asking ourselves and our partners different questions, and moving forward in different ways. And this is very nice and tidy, and it's extremely, extremely, extremely messy. And we work with it in different what we've introduced and started building slowly is to introduce lots of different types of participatory methods, using much more facilitation processes, getting basic understandings of facilitation toolkits to lots of different team members, and slowly trying to build steps of reflection and learning into everything that we do. I can use 10 minutes. What should I use them for? I think that's an open question. So we have 10 minutes. What are we going to do with these 10 minutes? Yes? Only questions allowed if you also come with a suggestion for the 10 minutes thing.
This question might take you 10 minutes to chew over.
Great.
So about the empathy thing, public sector institutions should have empathy-oriented objectives. You know, they're serving a public who has a need that they can't satisfy themselves in many cases. However, interestingly, the civil service is one of the top 5 professions where you find high proportions of psychopaths in top leadership positions. And bureaucratic institutions demonstrate the characteristics of psychopathic individuals. And the nature of a psychopath is that they are incapable of empathy. So we have a big fucking problem, really, because the point of the institution is to deliver on empathetic goals. We are saying that in order to shift the field in the correct direction, we need to start introducing a lot, and you can see that evidenced by like the rise of service design and user-centered design practices. But we are fighting against psychopaths who are incapable of feeling empathy. So what do we do about that?
Interesting question. Let me look at the clock. So, I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist. I'm going to just put that disclaimer up there to begin with. In terms of organizations, I mean, organizations are systems, and you need to change at the individual level if you want to change and transform systems. I think that that's possible if you work at that level. That means that that empathy needs to be on that level, on individual connections, and that you need to cultivate that mindset of empathy there. I don't know if I think that would be my main contribution here, is that I think that you are able to transform organizational structure or collapse organizational structures or not necessarily reinvent, but shift organizational structures with focus on activating the individual. And I think for me, empathy is a way of activating individuals, is a way of understanding and unleashing something in individuals. And I think that I have already seen in our organization, that if you are able to also understand why they resist change, what the security blanket is, and be empathetic to it instead of just trying to change it, that's important. The other sort of bigger conversation I think we'll have to have afterwards. I might need to call my best friend, who is a psychiatrist, in the meantime. So let's hold that one. There's a question here. Or an answer. There's an answer here. So I'm off the hook. Very good.
Yeah, before the next question, I'm just going to say that don't disappear yet, because we're not going to finish before 10:30. Solveig is going to finish like in 5 minutes, but we will continue. So don't go away.
So let's get that answer so that we can move on to the next question.
Yeah, so like I said, I've been also working in the city of Helsinki, which is the biggest organization, I think, in Finland, the biggest, at least, employer. I can't say that, you know, I've met psychopaths. Maybe I can talk without the microphone later. But yeah, but speaking to the microphone in a way that we have leaders there who are very empathetic, but we have leaders, and now I've also worked across different sectors, not only in education, but also with other sectors there. Urban design, for example, sector, and the cultural leisure sector, and the city hall. We have leaders who usually always say no, you know, to anything that you try to tell them. and then you are like stuck, you know, because you try to initiate things and so forth. So when leaders don't have an understanding, and this is something that I think also came to earlier in a way, that how you somehow sometimes click with some person and you understand straight away because you have a mutual understanding. But if there are leaders who don't really have that understanding and knowledge, and then you have people, experts or practitioners or whoever they are, saying that, you know, let's do, and these are the initiatives, that even these might be the political decisions that, you know, because we are politically decision-making body also that drives us. They still don't get it, and they are saying no. And they are sitting on the decisions, and they are sitting on the money, and they are sitting on the, you know, the job functions and everything, and they say no. And this is like so many times, you know. So how do you go about it? So what I have been doing is that, okay, let's not go into the psychotherapy, because that would take a long time. But the thing is that you need to be always making the model and going again back and saying, like, you know, and asking really questions and, you know, probing them, like, so for example, for me, of course, there has been a political decision that Helsinki wants to be carbon neutral 2035. So that's something, like, you know, you can always put on the table, like what's been done about it and so forth. And you have to be very resilient and going about it. So there are people who just like are blocks and who are on the top. And I don't know, you might call them psychopaths, but they are in those positions that you have to be able to maneuver through them, even though that they say no.
I think maybe a small reflection on that. I think one of the things that we have started actively using, so we have, as I said before, we have many participatory processes within the organization and amongst ourselves and our stakeholders or collaborators or consortiums. What I think is also important, and it relates to the empathy and it also relates to the listening to learn, is to explore the no and explore the gaps. Because that's actually one of the things that I think we have, just as human beings, not necessarily always the patience to do, is to understand perspectives that are different to ours. We then just take them. Okay, so that's a different perspective, but we actually don't understand what is the root of that. And I think that I can say, can I say swear words here? Okay, fine. Then I will as well. One of my favorite slides, and I didn't put it up here, that I have in every type of listening process that I have when I'm working with this in the organization and outside the organization, says, assumption is the mother of all fuck-ups. And we, in all collaborations, are driven by our assumptions. We have assumptions about the city and their climate goals and their way and this and that. So being able to understand the assumptions that we have about us, about our collaborators, about the collaboration itself, and continuously probe into that creates a cleaner intent and a cleaner field of collaboration. So that's where we also need to be curious about. And that's also what I think seeps into many of the long-standing collaborations that we have, that they become stale because we assume that we know, that this type of learning partner has that path and wants this, but we don't dare to actually engage in the conversation about why is it and where could we potentially pivot somewhere else together based upon our yeses and nos as well as an organization and as entities. I think I will actually leave it at that, because I think I've used my minutes. That means that I didn't address the education activities, which I am happy to do if I get a question around that or if it comes up in the conversation. But other than that, I think we have done a pretty good job at being together. I didn't follow the stage. You mostly listened and followed the instructions, and I thank you very much for that. You also engaged and talked to one another. I really appreciate that as well, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Solveig, for this interactive morning session. And as you pointed out, that coffee breaks and networking sessions are gold for building relationships. And that is why we also invite you 30 minutes before the presentation starts. So that time is as valuable as the rest of the program. Sola gave us a good reminder to rethink how we optimize our time. But yeah, then we have received a request for key takeaways from the events, and I thought that we could do this part together, because it seems that you had a lot of questions and a lot of new thoughts and insights, so it would be great to share it or share them with the rest of the group. So please, now I ask you to go to this website. Are you familiar with Mentimeter software? Some of you are, some of you are not, but it's super easy. Just go to this website, menti.com, and use the code you see here. And there are a few questions. So I ask you to answer to those questions, and I show the answers here on the screen in a bit. So you have a couple of minutes time for doing that. This is the first time when we do this, so please can someone say that the software functions? Could you open it? Yes, great, awesome, thank you. Yeah, so you can answer either in Finnish or English, and we, yeah. So the green one is how valuable is it to listen? You don't have to do it now. Yeah, I can do it later. And I will share these with you later. I will give you a couple of minutes time to answer the rest of the questions, and then I will read some of these points. I guess this wasn't a surprise that collaboration is at the heart, or is the core word for this morning. Okay, now it seems that 40 of you have answered to the first question, so we start to be ready with that one. I will read out loud some of these key takeaways here. And as mentioned, I will send this same link to you after the event, so you can go through all these comments. I hope with your colleagues or with someone who wasn't here to share these insights. Okay, so oxygen needed for change. I was quite sure that this comes at least once, but it seems that it came many times. So assumption is the mother of all fuck-ups. Now everyone of us have sworn. Collaboration is messy and difficult, and we somehow fail to give it time in our organizations. In collaboration, also the learning process and the cooperation skills are important. Realizing schedules are just a tool or a method. There is no transformation without collaboration and learning. Do not assume as it makes... Yeah, do not assume. And I think this was a good one. Basic skills are not so basic, especially when it comes to human interaction. And the value of being vulnerable, embracing mess, and giving each other breathing space. So this oxygen gene was quite valuable, it seems. And listening is also important, listening and to understand each other. And the next question was, should the discussion be continued? And many said yes. And Mikael would like to add something for this question.
Yeah, Solla is in Finland because we just had a grueling 2 days of workshopping around these methods. So today we've been focusing more about the collaboration side of the portfolios, but we were discussing with the folks from UNDP Accelerator Labs and more people from Climate-KIC and a bunch of Finnish organizations on how do we connect funding decisions, how do we connect understanding how we make an impact on the world, how do we connect projects, and how do we use collaboration and the portfolio to really bring all of these aspects together. And if getting more deep into these topics is something you're really interested in, I suggest contacting me, and there might be some next steps that we'll be working on with Climate-KIC as well.
We have one question over there. Sorry, my mistake.
This is where you need the post-its.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. And then the last one was one word that describes this morning. So it was collaboration, but some other words were orchestration, empathy. This was inspiring, a lot of listening, space for happy thoughts, organization, and new points on ecosystems. And now, if you would like to continue the discussion, as mentioned earlier, just a second. As mentioned earlier, we organize for the first time this HERÄÄMÖ After Talk event. And it's on Zoom, so it's happening virtually, and it's happening this Friday. It's morning session as well, from 9 to 10. And maybe... I know already that there are a bunch of people who have registered for this one, but I was thinking that maybe it's easier for you to register afterwards when you realize if you want to continue the discussion, if you have some things you didn't understand, or you would like to cooperate with some of the other participants we have here. So please join us on Friday morning. And you can find the registration link on our website, so on our Sitra Lab website.
Can I make a recommendation?
Yes.
So I just maybe want to nudge and put a recommendation then in there, because that it will be a very good opportunity for you to actually start practicing some of those listening skills. So I just encourage the ones of you who make time for it to really be conscious about how are you actually showing up and how are you actually moving towards listening and taking place in that space.
Yeah, and how it actually works is that on Zoom, they have a feature where you can divide people into smaller rooms. So you don't have to talk with all of the participants at the same time, but you can talk with one person or with a couple of people in the same room. So we will facilitate this event. And more about HERÄÄMÖ After Talk and also the development of this HERÄÄMÖ concept you can read on our new blog. Miten syntyy tapahtuma, joka jättää jäljen. And if you haven't noticed it yet, we also launched all of our HERÄÄMÖ events for this spring, so you will find the themes, the dates and the speakers. And as a teaser, in the end of the event, of course, good that you didn't run away yet, we have just opened the registration for February's HERÄÄMÖ. It will be in Finnish this time because our speaker is native Finn. And it's about creativity. So luovat keinot epävarmuuden käsittämiseen. And our promise that it will be at least as interactive as this morning session. But now I let you continue the day, and thanks a lot for coming. I hope to see you next time as well. Thank you.